Hello, BookTube. For the month of February, Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and I have been reading a graphic novel, Daredevil, Born Again, written by Frank Miller and drawn by David Mazzucchelli. And this is not unusual for our Mayberry Book Club of two. We have read many graphic novels, but one of the first ones we read was one of the most famous ones of all time, Batman Dark Knight Returns, which was both written and drawn by Frank Miller, and which starts off terrifically. First chapter of Dark Knight Returns is justifiably venerated. And then, I mean, I love this thing for the place that it has in the canon. Matthew is a stranger to the comic book world and to the comic book canon. So he didn't know anything about that, and I knew that going in. I knew that there was a chance that the manifest flaws of the story would end up bothering him more than its strengths, and they did. They did. Dark Knight Returns goes off the rails and never gets back on them again. It shows what you might say is a fundamental plotting weakness of Frank Miller's, which is an inability to really land the bird, an inability to really end his story, which makes it all the more strange and satisfying that Batman Year One, which is another graphic novel that we read by Frank Miller, had a kind of neatness to it, a very satisfying kind of conclusion. And now we're doing another Frank Miller production. We're doing Daredevil Born Again, and it's fantastic. It is one of the most satisfying things that Frank Miller has ever written. And I was very pleased. I had a couple of yardsticks for whether or not this thing was successful as a reading thing, as a reading club pick. One yardstick I had I didn't tell Matthew either one of them. One yardstick was that he would not be able to stop at 2 chapters, that he would just have to read the whole thing. It's that good, and he couldn't. And there was one other yardstick that I had. One other thing I wanted to see. I intentionally didn't mention it to him to see if it would stick out to him, the way it has stuck out to almost every comic book reader who has ever come across this collection of issues. It's a particular moment in the penultimate issue of this series, and it's one of the only things he bookmarked that did indeed stick out to him. I'll leave a link to his video down below, and we'll get to it. I'll show it to you myself. But the story here is very simple. A former supporting character of Daredevil's, Karen Page, knows his secret identity as the blind lawyer Matt Murdock, and sells that information in a moment of desperation. And it makes its way to Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime, a supervillain who's fought with Spider-Man, and who has been a Daredevil villain, although not with this much prominence until this series of issues. And he decides, rather than impulsively to act on this information, which might be wrong, that he should test it. And so he goes about pulling in contacts. He's a mafia-style villain. He's not Kang the Conqueror. So he pulls in contacts and exerts pressure in order to get Matthew Murdock's life torn apart. He doesn't go after Daredevil. He goes after Matt Murdock, gets his credit cards canceled, gets his bank accounts frozen, gets his law license pulled, blows up his building. And the pressure of that is driving Matt Murdock insane until the building blows up. And then he realizes, well, this is the Kingpin. This isn't just a series of unfortunate events. This is an orchestrated attempt by an actual supervillain. And he has no money. He has $15. He has no friends anymore. He suspects them all. So he is feverish, sick in mind and body, and makes the decision to go to the Kingpin's tower and confront him. And he gets the stuffing beaten out of him, and the Kingpin has his unconscious body put in a vehicle next to an empty bottle of liquor and thrown into the river, thinking this will be the ultimate way to discredit Matt Murdock, that his dead body will be dragged out of the river, and the story will be that in drunken despair he drove himself off the pier or whatnot. And that is a serious flaw in Frank Miller's storytelling. The whole point of Daredevil Born Again is how gritty it is, how realistic it is. And that's not realistic at all. Even if you grant the slightly unrealistic premise of the Kingpin trying to destroy Matt Murdock's life instead of just killing him, which has a dramatic satisfaction to it that you're perfectly willing to grant that. Even if you do grant that, once you've done that, once Matt Murdock is completely destroyed, his whole life is in ruins, he can never get it back, if he comes to your tower to duke it out with you and you beat the stuffing out of him, you then bend over and break his neck and incinerate the body. If you want the final coup de grace to destroy everything of the legacy of this person, then once the body is burned to ashes in the basement of one of your warehouses in Weehawken, You then hire a lunatic to put on his costume and start killing people until that person is apprehended and killed. No one else knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, so that would be, you would be not only killing the man, but blackening the reputation. And that would be an airtight story. There wouldn't be anything that anyone could do. No one in the superhero world knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. The superheroes in Manhattan would have been the first people to turn on this guy and turn him in. But that doesn't happen. Instead, the Kingpin lets him live and then realizes that there is no body, that Matt Murdock has escaped. And he proceeds even further down in his own personal degradation until finally he's at rock bottom. Feverish, delusional, dying, when he is saved by a kindly nun named Maggie, who may or may not be his mother. And he slowly, gradually starts building himself back up. And the Kingpin doesn't know that. But he knows that this didn't work out the way he wants, and it's driving him crazy. And so he decides on a course of action that is another piece of really bad writing. Now, the whole time that this is going on, he's getting more and more frustrated, lashing out at his insubordinates and whatnot. A Daily Bugle reporter named Ben Urich is slowly unraveling something of the story, enough to make the Kingpin look really bad, enough to make the whole world turn on him if the story got out. Ben Urich doesn't have as much as he needs because his own life has been in danger. Emissaries of the Kingpin have threatened him and his wife. They've told him, if you don't back off this story, you'll be really, really sorry that you did. One of those emissaries is a brutish nurse, who's a great Frank Miller creation, and who is incapacitated by Matt Murdock in an earlier issue that we read, and is now in prison. And the Kingpin is told that she wants to talk, that she's starting to talk and name him in order to reduce her own sentence. And so we get a convergence, and we get another example. I showed you one earlier. We get another example of the beautiful choreography of some of the scenes in this graphic novel. Because Ben Urich has a police guard. Since his own life and his wife's life were threatened, he has a police guard, a bodyguard. But he goes with a contact of his to the correctional facility in order to interview this nurse and get even more dirt on the Kingpin. But the Kingpin has got there first, and not only is the contact one of his people, but so is the guard inside the cell. And we get an amazing sequence that I want to show you. There we go. See? Those are the principals. A tiny little room. That's the guard, Ben Urich's bodyguard. There's the nurse. There's Ben Urich. There's a friend of Foggy Nelson's, who is also a photographer, and is right there in the cell taking pictures. There's the Kingpin's emissary, and there is the corrupt cop. And suddenly, all the pieces start to go together. All the characters start to notice in sequence what's going on. The nurse is shot. She's taking pictures. The bodyguard is shot, but shoots back. There's gunfire going all around while she continues to take pictures, and Ben Urich has to take things into his own hand against the one remaining person. And we finally get a mirror image of the vignette that we started with. That is the aftermath of the room. Just incredible. Just amazing stuff. And like I said, while this is going on, the Kingpin knows that his plans have not succeeded the way he wants, and he gets desperate. And he does something that he absolutely would not do. Matthew, in his video, I'll leave a link to Matthew's video down below, but in his video he points out that we have hardly seen Daredevil, the superhero, in this story at all. But it does take place in Manhattan. In Stan Lee's Manhattan, which is chock-a-block with superheroes. You can barely do anything without running into one of them, including all the heavy hitters of the Marvel Universe except the Hulk. So you've got the Fantastic Four, you've got the Avengers, you've got Spider-Man, you've got all these people in New York City, and the X-Men right up in Westchester County, so not far away by their aircraft. The Kingpin knows this, right? He presents himself as a legitimate businessman, but he knows this, and he knows that against all but a tiny handful of those superheroes, he would simply lose instantly. He picks on the ones that have close enough power set to make it worth his while, so to speak, but against the Thing, he wouldn't have much of a chance. He would have no chance at all, and he knows this. So he can't do anything overt, and so far he hasn't done anything overt. He's destroyed the life of one person. But he decides, out of a mounting sense of aggression and desperation, to suborn a general in the U.S. Army to bring a man named Nuke stateside. And we gradually get introduced to who this Nuke character is. He's drugged out of his mind. He's a super soldier, just like Captain America, only we get the sense not successful. It didn't work. And it certainly didn't have the moral fiber to begin with. He has had plastics inserted into his muscles. He's had minor physical augmentations to make him flame-proof or untiring or unbeatable. And he's a homicidal maniac. Somehow or other, the Kingpin he has pictures, incriminating pictures, that allow him to maneuver a U.S. Army official to bring this person stateside, where he never is. He's an unofficial arm of the military in brush wars overseas. And Kingpin's plan is to bring Nuke to Hell's Kitchen in New York City with flamethrowers and bazookas, and just start laying waste to the place with explosions, killing hundreds and hundreds of people, figuring this will flush Daredevil out of hiding, and then I guess Nuke will kill him too. How many armed thugs has Daredevil beaten in his life? It's a ridiculous drop of the plot. The Kingpin would never do it. It can easily be traced back to him. But nevertheless, he does. And there's widespread chaos and slaughter. And Daredevil's on the scene. Matt Murdock has only just put on the costume again. For the first time since the first issue of this run of series. And he is trying his best to deal with Nuke, but it doesn't work. Nuke is sort of a souped-up and crazy version of Captain America. So there's no way that he can win. But he is trying, and there's a downed helicopter right there in Hell's Kitchen. There are all sorts of people hurt or dead. There are all sorts of fires going on, set off by the napalm and the explosions and whatnot. And Daredevil is in the midst of it, doing the best he can, when suddenly we are reminded by Frank Miller that we are in a superhero universe, and that this sort of thing, unlike someone's credit cards being canceled, would become known to superheroes. They show up, and it is a fantastic moment, the moment that Matthew bookmarked, where we're told, out of nowhere, they appear. And we see Captain America. He's holding someone who's been wounded, a character in our story who's been wounded, and he says, put those fires out. We don't want a gas main going up. And the narration tells us it's a soldier with a voice that could command a god. And does, because on a rooftop is Thor. Suddenly, it's raining so hard it hurts. And we don't see anything of Thor but that one panel. And we don't see Thor. He is in shadow. To make him even more remote, to make him even more unbelievable. Nothing like this has appeared in this story, right? The Avengers have not appeared in this story. Iron Man shows up in a lamentable design of his armor at the time and tells Daredevil the man is in federal custody. We're here to apprehend him. Back off. And we're told computer circuitry quietly clicks in Iron Man's gauntlets, and Daredevil knows that he's facing enough power to level a city block. So he does back off. He doesn't fight the Avengers. And he hands off Nuke to the federal authorities, who don't seem to do a good job of holding on to him. But first we get a scene that is another lapse in writing. In the mission where the nun who rescued Daredevil lives, some of the survivors of this attack are brought just to lay on church pews until they can be triaged. And one of those survivors is Foggy Nelson's girlfriend. Foggy Nelson is the longtime friend and law partner of Matt Murdock, who has no idea where Matt Murdock is. He has no idea where he's been all this time while he's been hitting rock bottom. And he hurries to this mission to find his girlfriend and walks right past Matt Murdock in the doorway. Notice Matt Murdock is right there. He's not hiding. He's standing, the only other person in the doorway. And we're told, Foggy, he was my partner in another life. Good thing he doesn't notice me. Well, yeah, it's a good thing, but it's not possible. Matt Murdock is standing right there. No matter how preoccupied or worried Foggy was, he would certainly notice that his best friend was standing right there in the doorway. But he doesn't. It's just Frank Miller pushing his luck. And needless to say, Nuke gets away from the federal authorities and goes on a rampage again. And this time he's stopped by Captain America, who is, an earlier version of him and who has realized that Nuke is a product of the same ongoing program. Captain America didn't know the government was continuing to experiment on young men to make them super soldiers. Now he does know that, and he feels a kind of loyalty to Nuke, but it doesn't help. The government wants Nuke taken off the picture, and they send in an attack helicopter. He gets in the way and is mortally wounded, but not pointlessly, because Daredevil manages to bring his dead body to the Daily Bugle, lays it on Ben Urich's desk. This is the story of the century. He brings it directly to the paper. He doesn't bring it to the police. He doesn't bring it to Avengers Mansion. He brings the dead body to the paper to have the paper talk about it. And it's really bad for the Kingpin. The Daily Planet, the Daily Bugle breaks the story, and all of a sudden, Kingpin is in all kinds of hot water. All of his cat's paws are turning on him. He's spending a lot of money in litigation to stay out of jail. We get that page of him just miserable. You know, that his life is being torn apart. His allies and cat's paws are turning on him. Nothing more than that. Matt Murdock never approaches him. No one says a word to him. As far as we know, the Avengers never approach him, even though they certainly would, because he sent an attack helicopter to Hell's Kitchen. Instead, the last we see of the Kingpin, he's just really unhappy. He's sad. And then we see one last glimpse of Matt Murdock. He's with Karen Page. He's not in costume. He's just walking down the street. They're really happy together. This is great. It's a wonderful spring day. How does it say? I live in Hell's Kitchen and do my best to keep it clean. That's all you need to know. Yep, I'm just walking with my girlfriend on a beautiful street there. Yep, okay. All right, and don't get me wrong, it's very, very satisfying stuff. This is a wonderful graphic novel. I'm very glad that Matthew liked it. But what on earth? Keep in mind, this is not a Elseworlds or What If kind of story. These 6 issues of Daredevil Born Again took place in the Daredevil continuity. You read one issue, and then the next issue of that month was the first in this arc. Then you read this arc, and then you go on to read the next one. And that doesn't make any sense. The ending doesn't make any sense. Not only would the Kingpin not do what he does, which is to start war on American soil, but if he did that, the Avengers would deal with him. They have all the proof they need. They would deal with him. They've certainly sent supervillains to maximum security prison on a lot less. They don't. They appear not to be interested in him at all after this. Captain America already knows what's going on. Iron Man could easily learn the rest, and nothing that the Kingpin can do can face Thor. So the Avengers don't seem to care. They don't seem to do anything about it after that. And on top of that, Frank Miller's done after this. He's saying, okay, that was the story I really enjoyed doing. I hope you all like it. I'm gone. What does the writer of the next issue of Daredevil do? What does that writer do? Matt Murdock, as far as we know, in that last panel, he doesn't appear to ever want to be Daredevil again. He's not Daredevil, he's Matt Murdock. He's got a peaceful life. And that would make sense, because everyone knows that he was Daredevil, so there's no point in being a masked Avenger anymore to protect your secret identity if everyone knows your secret identity, if that can be made common knowledge by the one man who's certain of it. But apart from that, that one man is a vicious criminal, the Kingpin, and he is left in possession of millions of dollars, relatively unmolested, a free man, not punished. He's not in any kind of prison. He's not in any kind of electronic power dampening shackles or anything like that. And he still knows that he was right. He knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. So he would wait and spend some money and calm down his reputation, and then he would have Matt Murdock killed. Or he would have Karen Page kidnapped and tortured to death on video so that he could then show that to Daredevil, and it will all start again. There's a reason why the mechanics of secret identities have been in place for 80 years, because they make sense. If you don't have that, then this exact situation will inevitably mean that you're destroyed. If people who aren't operating inside the bounds of the law know enough to hurt you, well, then you're done. And that's the mess that Frank Miller left for subsequent writers. Okay, I'm handing you the Daredevil reins. I'm done with this little run that I wanted to do. Oh, by the way, Matt Murdock has no interest in being Daredevil anymore. Everyone knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, especially the Kingpin. Good luck. Yeah. But as that aside, I loved reading this again with Matthew, and we are moving on for the month of March to read every Sherlock Holmes short story. So feel free to join us. But I'm going to wrap this up for now. I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.